It's okay. We loved him. He's gone. There's nothing we can do about it. It was an accident.
His legs were just dangling straight down, and his arms were dangling.
It is every mother's worst nightmare when you see your baby blue and unresponsive.
Did the laws in place potentially lead to more deaths?
They certainly could have.
You know, I'm looking at this table. This is 2 years of reporting by us, and it's pictures of people whose lives were changed forever, who lost loved ones, documents from the federal government that essentially don't give us any information.
We have things that we have received, and we have things that are, like we have these whited out pieces of paper that should have information, and they don't.
That could save people's lives.
Essentially, and there's people that say that's exactly right. If people had known sooner, then things wouldn't have happened. And these people that we have on the table, they've been trying to sound the alarm for years.
Tell me about Danny. You knew that was going to be the first question.
Yeah, it's a great question. After a while, when you have a dead kid, there's nothing new to say. So you don't have an opportunity to talk about your child as much. So I love that question. Thank you for asking. He was a great kid. He was adorable, had a beautiful smile. He would flirt all the time. We'd be in a restaurant and he'd flirt with the people around. They'd come up and say, "What a lovely child you have." So what happened is I was at work and I picked up my older son, Eli. We were driving and we went to pick up Danny. And I saw literally 6, 7 police cars on the street. So I pulled up and I went and knocked on the door, and the police officer said, did something happen here? And he said, yes, there was an accident and you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, I need to go to the hospital? It's my son? I went to the hospital and I saw the doctor and he said, it's like a movie. We tried, we couldn't, we tried and,
It's okay. We loved him. He's gone. There's nothing we can do about it. It was an accident. And they told me I could hold him as long as I wanted. I thought they meant it. But they had a heat lamp on him and I was holding him and they were like, well, we need to take him. I said, okay. They asked me, did I want a lock of his hair? I said, okay. They asked me, did I want a handprint? I said, okay. And then they asked us what we wanted to do with the body. Now, that was a question, huh? Like, how do you answer that question?
So what happened exactly?
But what happened is there's a design flaw that was known, not to us, but there was a design flaw. What happened is that the kids, when they wake up, they rock on that rail. And as they rock on the rail, the tension loosens, and then it folds, and their head goes down, and they strangle without a sound. Because the crib doesn't fall, there's not a commotion, it just folds their head forward. And that's what happened, that's how my son was killed. A crib that collapsed and strangled him at daycare.
Was it a random freak accident?
No, it was not a random freak accident. The day after we buried our son, we read in the Chicago Tribune that he was the 12th child to die. It was a defective product. The government knew it was defective. The manufacturer knew it was defective. Daycare didn't know. We didn't know. But it wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident. And it could have been known, and Danny would be alive today. I remember, after Danny died, I couldn't, whenever they probably thought I was completely crazy. Whenever I'd see someone with a baby, I'd go and I'd be like, you have to please check for recalled products. And then I remember one woman said, oh yeah, I've heard about that. The manufacturer's been doing a really good job getting the word out to people. I'm like, no, the manufacturer isn't getting the word out to people,
You know, we're all investigative reporters behind this table, but in a way, this is a story about moms piecing things together themselves.
I think when you see that each person was trying to do something, sound the alarm, and piecing this together themselves with whatever they could, and then things kept happening.
When we started this, 2 years ago, and we thought it would be a story or two, I was trying to think, what do you think about it, like, made us just stay on it and stay on it and stay on it?
For me, it was the very first interview we did with Jan Henson. You could just tell that there was so much more to this story than just these couple of initial stories that we had planned.
And she had an interesting perspective in that she's also an attorney too.
And a respiratory therapist.
I believe that God placed me in that position because He knew I would know that Asher's airway was compromised. When I saw Asher in that chair, it was July the 25th of 2014. I came around as a grandmother, just helping my daughter decorate her classroom. I came from the sort of back perspective around to the front, and his little arm was sticking out and it was completely gray. And so I rushed from that point forward. And as I lifted him, and his legs were just dangling straight down, and his arms were dangling, and his head was flopped all the way over, I thought, he's dead. You know, I have a vibrant little 7-year-old, adorable little fella. He's got, you know, some learning disability, oxygen-related issues, but is doing, you know, quite well. As an attorney, I drilled down. First, I called Fisher-Price just as a grandmother and said, this is how I found my grandson. And then they came back at me with the most bizarre, very well rehearsed, I thought, speech saying our chair meets or exceeds the ASTM 2194-07 standard for bassinets and cradles. And I said, really? Well, that's fascinating, but we need to start this conversation over, because I'm trying to tell you I found my grandson blue, lifeless, and compromised in your product. And the way that they delivered that message to me caused me great alarm. And I thought, they have said this before, not once, not twice. It's actually written out and they're reading this script. And therefore, something's got to be horribly wrong.
People are going to hear about Fisher-Price a lot, and that is, you know, one company. There are more, but it's indicative of the lack of transparency by the federal government and the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
It also, the case of the Rock and Play in particular, really exposed all of the problems with the Consumer Product Safety Act. Every single one of these people, to a T, all of these mothers and grandmothers had no idea that the Consumer Product Safety Commission even existed until they had to know that the Consumer Product Safety Commission existed.
And when they found out, like, what the agency can and cannot do.
Shocking. Yeah. They were shocked.
Well, this is just my story of my government failing my daughter and failing the innocent lives of infants. This isn't fun stuff to talk about. But if we're not talking about it, then we're not saving lives and we're not affecting change. It is deeply disturbing that a small group of people, regulators, lobbyists, lawmakers, can have such a profound and devastating impact on the lives of so many. It is deeply disturbing that just because it's sold doesn't mean it's safe. I mean it. There's this assumption that someone out there is ensuring our safety on products that we use every day, and it couldn't be any further from the truth. I think that if most people knew, they would be shocked. They might not even think that it's true. I'm doing advocacy because I'm still Emma's mother, and this is the example that I would want to set for my daughter. I would want to show Emma that no matter how hard it might seem to be, it is always worth working towards changing the world to be a little bit better. No matter how difficult the circumstances, that's the example that I would want to set for my daughter. It is so unbelievable that our own federal Consumer Product Safety Commission has to ask permission from the manufacturer before alerting the public of the dangers and the risks of a product that they know is killing and injuring infants. And in the case of the Rock and Play sleeper, there were hundreds. Now those are just people who made reports, okay? And they had that information. They knew. More importantly, Fisher-Price knew. Fisher-Price knew that their product was killing infants. Fisher-Price knew from their own customers that there were design flaws and risks and deaths and injuries. Our own Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission could not warn the public. Had they been able to do that, I would still have my daughter. Mothers need to know, this isn't a club that you want to be in. You do not want to be one of us. And I am talking to everybody who's willing to listen.
She's probably one of the people that we talked to that was the most passionate about the transparency aspect of everything, because she says, had she known, or the people who gave her this gift, had they known that children had died, that she would never have had this in her home.
The companies need to file what's a 15B report, a hazard report essentially with the government, and that comes before recalls. And she was in that in-between stage where the company had filed 15B reports, so the government knew there was an issue, but it wasn't recalled yet.
At that time in February of 2018, Fisher-Price filed their 15B report and said that they were aware of 17 babies that had been found dead in a Rock and Play. And Erica's daughter died months later. And her point is, if they knew in February of 2018, why wasn't there something said right then and there, when in fact it was almost 18 months later when the product was recalled.
And she says if they would have alerted the public then that all of these babies had died while being in this, she wouldn't have lost her child.
Correct.
The government has all these rules and laws and things like that. 2 years ago, if anyone would have said 6B to you, you probably have no clue what that meant.
No.
But it's a powerful law that essentially protects manufacturers.
They put this rule into the Consumer Product Safety Commission that the agency cannot release anything about a company without getting their consent, so as not to wrongfully accuse
And
again,
harm their
and
reputation
harm.
that would have financial effects.
These reports are supposed to, among other things, detail the incidents of what happened to people, the consumers who were harmed by the product, or that the product had some sort of failing. The wheel went flying off the stroller or something like that.
You know, we believe in transparency, and that arms people with information. And when you get, you know, documents that are completely whited out by the federal government because of the law, I mean, this is anything but transparency.
Right.
As we look through these blank documents, it's even more shocking. Like, we literally, in some cases, had to get our attorneys involved to get these documents, and then when we finally get them from the federal government, most of them are blank.
When we took these to the print shop, I'm assuming that they probably thought they made a mistake when they printed this order for us, because, like,
they're all blank, or most of them.
I mean,
Keep going. I mean, that's page after page after page.
we paid, I don't
after
know
page.
how many cents per copy to get.
Yeah, keep going.
You know, every single one of these folks that we talked to thought that what happened to their child or grandson or granddaughter was a one-off, that it was just some freak random accident that happened. And then in some cases pretty quickly they learned that that was not the case. One of them was very specific, and it mentioned, my granddaughter died on this date, I live in Amarillo. So there was enough information that I started searching obituaries in Amarillo looking for a 4-month-old girl who died, and found who I thought was the granddaughter of Kathy Greninger. And I
You sent her a letter.
She called me right away, and she said to me, I've been waiting for somebody to contact me. I want to tell this story.
Well, I'm glad you were able to do your investigation and figure out who I was on there. Savannah was born perfectly healthy. She was the joy of our life. We loved her a lot. She was beautiful. She had her own personality. I mean, she was the joy of our life. That morning, I was getting ready to babysit her because her parents were going to work. About 6:45 that morning, I get a call from Savannah's dad. He's screaming hysterically on the phone, telling me to hurry up and get over there, that Savannah was gone. This is a picture of me when she was born, on the day she was born. And the coroner arrived, and they took pictures of everything and pretty much told us that they thought that it was the chair she was in. This was her on Halloween. She had apparently rolled on her side during the night and had stopped breathing. That's all I have. There's her obituary. Did an autopsy on her. It was after that I reported that I believed that the chair was responsible to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I did a lot of investigating after this happened to see if I could find where this had happened to somebody else, where their baby had passed away in it. And on the CPSC website, I couldn't tell where there was any other deaths. And it was quite a shock to me that there were 13 of them. There's 13 babies that are not alive because of this. And I think it's cause for recall.
When this warning for the infant to toddler rocker comes out, which in itself was unusual, then there's this letter from Commissioner Trumka. The language that he uses in this, he says that Congress must immediately repeal the gag rule, and that's what he calls 6B. He doesn't say 6B, he says the gag rule, because he says that this completely stopped them from being able to give information to the public.
So the warning on the infant to toddler rocker is not as strong as you would have liked it?
It doesn't match our first draft for sure, and I would have certainly liked to say more. I mean, there's things that I know about that product and what happened with it that I'm not allowed to say because of the gag rule. We negotiated the release that we put out. We can't say anything outside the four corners of that.
So literally, I am sitting with a CPSC commissioner right now. You know a product still out there is more dangerous than your commission was able to let people know. You can't tell me anymore right now.
The only things that I can tell you about that are what are in the four corners of the document we negotiated with them. Otherwise, we'd be violating that archaic gag rule that we need to repeal.
But that product is more dangerous than you were able to tell people?
I couldn't say that if I wanted to, and I'm not saying that specifically. What I'm saying is we know more, and if I was a parent, there's information I'd want to hear that I'm not allowed to say.
You can't tell us right now in this interview?
I can't.
If you did?
I couldn't tell my wife at home. I can't tell, I mean, because of the gag rule, it blocks us from saying anything outside of what we've already negotiated with the company.
How does that make you feel? That you can literally be sitting here, know more about a product and not able to say anything, even to your wife? It
weighs heavily. When we, on March 31st, when we saw, we got a briefing on the infant to toddler rocker and the deaths associated with it, and they sent us a package of hundreds and hundreds of pages of information about the deaths associated with that product. And so I read medical reports, coroner's reports, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching information, and I didn't sleep that night. Until I was done reading all this, I didn't sleep for a couple days because that much information weighing on you and not being able to tell the public when that should be our most central role, you know, trumpeting that information from the rooftops, it's heartbreaking and aggravating. We started on this path 2 years ago. We've done many stories on it. We're not stopping because, you know, we believe that, you know, we believe in transparency and we believe that the public has a right to know. We see all these families changed forever because of what's happened, and we're going to stay on it.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to contribute to something positive, because there are a lot of mothers out there who lose their children, who don't have anything that they can do about it, and I'm doing it for them too.